Right.
Like,
Hit that gap. I'll call to order the meeting of January 24th, 2023. This is our board workshop to go over our agenda. I'm looking, I don't see any citizens. Everybody looks like staff. Just as a reminder, if we have any citizens join us, public comment will not be allowed, but questions are, and there are comment cards available that can be handed to the deputy. So we will begin by going over, excuse me, our draft agenda for the February 2nd regular board meeting. Mr.
all right,
Superintendent.
good morning, glad to see everybody here. Got a special treat for you this board meeting. First ever, we've never tried this before. We're having, we're doing a celebration of bands. We did have 3 schools, bands, scoring the top 3 in the state, Fleming Island, Oak Leaf, and Arden Park. Representatives of all of them will be there. We're gonna start off, and it's, you know, band people are very passionate. In case you didn't know that, Sue was in the band, so I know this personally. And so they're gonna have the entire Fleming Island band come in the front
Wow.
and play. So it'll be a first time ever, and it should be raucous. I would think with that many folks, and so we're going to celebrate all things band at the beginning of this particular meeting. In addition to that, we'll have Mr. Stromolo also present awards to them, similar to what's done for athletics. Yeah.
So what are they going to play?
They're going to play a couple of tunes. It's
Are we going to get some drum lines?
Oh,
Can we get a little drum line?
The whole thing.
Oh,
I'm
my.
just kind of giving you warning that if you have that many people, you can expect it to be loud. I mean, it's going to.
Do you want me to bring my flute? I still have my flute. I could
Yes. I still have my recorder, Mary.
Ooh. Wow.
And we're going to do this inside the TTC?
Inside the TTC.
100.
They measured it, they feel confident, and we're going to have the screen up on that side, so it'll be
Here's the big question.
packed.
Can we fit all their parents?
Well, it's going to be standing room only, there's no doubt, but you know after they play, those people will thin out. I have 6 people there by the end.
Right.
So we're going to celebrate all things band. We're also going to celebrate Fleming Island's Purple Star Award of Distinction. We're going to celebrate Brady White, who's one of Florida's representatives to the Senate Youth Program. We're going to celebrate our school-related Employee of the Year as well as our Teacher of the Year, whoever that might be, from this coming Thursday's event. We're going to have an update from the foundation. We're also going to have an update from Career and Tech Ed. And I wanted to call it attention. We're going to have a school showcase from Bannerman Learning Center. Awesome, it does a great job in some difficult circumstances. And then we have public comment, and it occurred to me that maybe I ought to give a clarification on public comment. We were at the strategic planning meeting last night, and a constituent on the activity that we had was talking about public comment, and the comment from the person was more or less, why doesn't the board answer when that happens? And a couple things came to mind, and I wasn't sharp enough on the spot to come up with it, but I'm sharp this morning in kind of providing some perspective to it. One would be the purpose of public comment is for the public to have an opportunity to express themselves related to the agenda items that the board is about to vote on, right? So that is the whole purpose of public comment. Before the board votes, the public has the opportunity to come up and say, hey, I know you're voting on C3 and it's this, and I don't think that should happen, and here's why, and or it should happen, or whatever their view is, right? That's the purpose of public comment. And I think that some people are mistaken and think it's the time to either bring forth a grievance that they have, about a teacher or a situation involving their child. Many times we cannot comment on that because either it's information within a student's educational record, and therefore is protected under the law, and therefore we can't comment. So we're simply not going to react to those kinds of questions or events that occur. And at the same time, I always say I'd like to provide good customer service every day of the month, not just the first Thursday of the month. So all you got to do is call to address the issue that is relevant. So the purpose of public comment is to provide comment on the agenda items that are brought forward. It never occurred to me that nobody ever said that out loud. Like I say, this is the purpose to it, right? So people there's clear understanding. Somebody wrote the question last night, and I wasn't sharp enough to kind of come up with an answer right there on the spot, and so now it's here. So the very first item is minutes from the school board meeting and the workshop on the 20th. Barring no questions, we'll move on to number 2. Number 2 is personnel consent agenda. As you know, it's our never-ending quest to revise all job descriptions within the district as part of the OPAGA audit. So you can see several job descriptions that are embedded within there, as well as additional job descriptions for potential new positions. So just so we know the timeline of events, you know, we're right now evaluating all of our employees. All those evaluations are occurring now. They'll be finished shortly in the coming weeks. We then bring forward an allocation package in March. We reappoint employees most employees in April. We reappoint annual contract and administrators in June. So to keep in accordance with that, this is the timeline that we have to follow. 3 is Black History Month. So we have a proclamation honoring Black History Month. As you know, February is Black History Month. There are several activities that we do within Clay County schools in order to promote and recognize the accomplishments of African Americans within our society. And so that is Black History Month proclamation. The next item is out-of-state and overnight student travel. To remark there. Next is it's also CTE month, which is why we're having a presentation on CTE. But in case you didn't know, almost 11,000 students take CTE courses. We have roughly 40,000 students. So a little better than a quarter of all the students are involved in CTE courses. There's 4 career and tech ed pathways available to all students, whether in junior high or in high school. We really do a great job of providing school choice and options within Clay County School for parents to latch on to. Ms. Cole and Ms. Mosley should be recognized for the amazing job that they do related to that. In addition, you're going to see additional items later on that deal with career and tech student organizations. So believe it or not, little fun fact, I was actually in FFA, Future Farmers of America, as a high school student. I did don the blue corduroy. That's a little known trivia fact about me, in case you ever quizzed on such a thing.
Did you ever raise a pig?
I did raise a pig.
You did?
Yes.
So
I've
impressive.
done all of those events, and I think what it was, we came from a city environment, and my parents then moved, for a better life for my 2 brothers and myself. At that point, I'm number 9 out of 10, so the last 3 were there, and they moved from the city out to the country when I was in high school, in my high school years, and so I had that kind of environment. These clubs, whether it's FBLA, FCCLA, HOSA, any of those are valuable to what we do, the educational experience of students. If you've ever been to any of the, you just have to go to the fair to see all of that.
Can I make a quick side comment, Mr.
Sure.
Borowski? I'm sorry, through the chair.
Of course.
But if you're ever invited to judge for any of those events, they always need judges. And the first time I did it, I thought, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been involved with any of these clubs. It is so rewarding. And it is so much fun to get to I just did an FBLA judging on a Saturday ago, or Friday ago. And it was at FSCJ, but I mean, talk about impressive students. It's just an incredibly rewarding experience. And I know they always need judges, so anybody out there who might be interested or might have the time, strongly encourage it.
Mr. Brodsky, also on the same note of CTE, I know last year, I believe it was, we had some sort of a conference. I can't think of what it was called. There was a name for it, but they had all of the local economic partners, business partners, Northeast Florida.
It was sort of like the
Like a
strategic
consortium.
planning.
Yes.
It was a strategic planning session for CTE. Mhm.
And I know that they were reevaluating some of the programs that they were currently offering and potentially looking at ones that were of higher interest and that kind of industry, where the industry's growing locally, to give students exposure. So has that been?
Yes, that is going on, currently too. In addition, the state releases what's called their CAPE list each year, and those would be the courses that have an industry certification tied to it. Because in today's world, it's not just about interest, it's is there a job in that area after? That's what Ms. Gilhouse is referring to. But then also, how do we know that kids have received the skills that they need in order to do that? You do that through what's called industry certification, which is a test. So for example, the Garber Academy at Middleburg High School is one that ACE is the auto mechanic certification piece that's taught there. Of course, we have the ViStar Academy and many other academies. I also want to point out that we also have active advisory boards. Part of that is community involvement within that. So we do have about 175 to 200 community business people that work within our school on advisory panels to advise within those academies. So there's a lot going on. I'm very proud of CTE. I'm proud of the school choices that we offer to parents for their students to take advantage of those things.
It seemed like one of the ones that they hit hardest on, that's one of the most rapidly growing and highest paying industries, is aviation. And I know I think we have at Oakley, but I think that's the only school we really have aviation offered. So if that's one that
And that took a while to put together because of all of the simulators
Right.
and things of that nature. It's a very high cost
And of course, I
operation.
don't tell you guys, healthcare is like
Healthcare is huge.
booming industry and like that.
The other side, no, and I'm gonna throw a plug out for any IT programs, because that's a whole nother, somebody put a bug in my ear.
Well, the
And
AI
push the
that's coming
IT
out
as well, because there's definitely a need for that in the community.
For sure. I have a friend who's very involved in the IT field, and he was saying that so many jobs are going to go towards AI in the future.
Absolutely, yeah.
That we've got to be prepared
And security.
now.
And yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was gonna say for IT, a lot of their stuff isn't necessarily based off of degrees, it's off of certifications. So even if we offer some form of, hey, you can get your beginning certification so that when you graduate, you're already prepared.
So we do that in almost every high school. Middleburg High School has an actual academy for that, which is very successful, and they go on to advanced certification. I used to joke, even when I was there, that there were some of the kids that were in that program could really rule the world, and because of the reliance on technology, and there's actually an apprenticeship program where they actually work and get practical skills at repairing the actual infrastructure at Middleburg High.
Is that a partnership with Pragmatic Works?
Don't know about that one.
Okay.
That might be. That sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
Well, the other thing I'd be interested in is how many students are signing up for these programs and how much capacity there is within the program. So like, especially with aviation and IT, industries that we know are growing, is there a high level of student interest? Do we have open seats? Are there students being turned down because we're at capacity? Do we need to grow the program further? So.
And do we have the teachers? I know that.
That is the linchpin.
I'm not certain which program it was, but I know that they were truly seeking a carpentry teacher.
Yeah.
And they had
That was at Clay
an
High for a
exceptionally
while.
good sub who had the experience, but didn't have the experience, if that makes sense. They didn't have the right number of years or credentials or something, and it's sort of like, you know, they are teaching, they are giving the experience, the information that the students need,
So
so.
that's a great segue to our next item, which is out-of-state travel and overnight field trips for CTE. What CTE does is they give you up front all of those organizations such as FFA, FBLA, and their state and national competitions. So we kind of approve them all at one time because you wouldn't know if the student's going to that competition until the previous competition ends. And so that's a listing of all CTE out-of-state overnight trips possible related to the programs. Okay, next is the approval to advertise the adoption and set the public hearing for April 6th for K-5 math and 612 social studies materials. This is the process under the statute 1006.283 related to the adoption of materials. So a couple things I'd like to point out about this. So why is it an adoption year for K-5 math and 612 social studies? Well, last year was the K-12 math adoption, and you have to adopt within a 2-year time frame. So we elected to not adopt K-5 math at that time so that we could further analyze the adoption of the new best standards and ensure that the material that we pick is in alignment with that, which was a smart strategic move on our part. Similarly, a similar process for social studies. Social studies, and you'll see the listing on the future pages behind the title page. For social studies K-12, we're not adopting American history, civics, those courses in particular, because we want to further study the standards and the materials that are state approved in order to make that determination. The other courses are going to be adopted this year through that process. It's a multi-step process to get us to that point. So what this item is simply asking for is approval to advertise the adoption and set the public hearing. The public hearing wouldn't occur until April 6th related to the material. And of course, you know, the material is vetted by several groups, including teachers, curriculum specialists, coaches, etc., to make sure it's in compliance with state legislation, and mainly to make sure that it aligns with standards. If you have a textbook that doesn't teach what it is you're supposed to teach, well, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's painstaking work that goes into taking each and every standard, what kids are supposed to learn, and applying it to the book. And does the book actually teach the standard or have information related to the standard involved? That correlation, that alignment, that congruence of standard to the book is essential. So it's months to get us to this point. So I think sometimes people think, like, just a couple people picked this. There's several elimination rounds that get to the point. Part of it is also IT has to take a look at it, because now many of the books are electronic in nature, and then curriculum specialists review it. There's pre-selection committees that review the materials, and essentially we narrow it down to a couple of acceptable items that can be adopted. We seek input from all teachers that teach those subjects related to that. And then, of course, we advertise that. So there's a whole process involved in that. It's not as simple as, well, that book looks good. And of course, we're particularly sensitive to the idea that we want to ensure that we're in compliance with any DOE or state mandate regarding instructional materials. So that's great care has brought us to this point.
Can I add one more quick thing? Being a math teacher in 5th grade, and I used to always hear from parents about how I was teaching it wrong at times, etc. And it's much more difficult than when I was in school. I just want to reiterate what you just said. And the state approves our adoption options.
Right.
They give us adoption options. We do not go out and seek the most difficult thing to teach. They give us the options. And the fact that teachers have buy-in on this is huge, as well as the coaches. And yes, they had that sitting in front of us. We could go and play with it. We could go online and try things. We could see all of the depth of each of those programs as well. And when I mean depth, it's not just, here's the standard, here's what you're going to teach, this is how you're going to do it, but here are the tools that you can use. And when that student has a problem, here's another tool that you can use. And if that doesn't work, here's another tool that you can use. That is huge. And the fact that these two programs, I think I saw 2 programs in here, are the ones that have been brought forward are great. So the work that's done by you guys is awesome. Thank you.
So, Ms. Cole brings up a point, I didn't think of phrasing it that way, right? It's not only, like I focused on the standard and does the book cover the standard, but there's also tools that are involved in getting by for the teacher to actually use the book is also very important, as she pointed out.
Quick question. When we do a K-5 math adoption, does that include like replenishing manipulatives and especially for K-5, I know that that's critical.
I think it's strictly the materials, we can purchase manipulatives separately, I would assume.
So the manipulatives are not a part of the purchase of the curriculum?
It depends on the publisher and what
publisher.
comes with it, what tools come with the program that's chosen.
And
I just
that's
wanna
one
make
of
sure
the things
teachers,
that the
like you were
teachers
saying,
look at,
have what they
All the
need.
tools they need.
I have a question. How long, when you adopt a curriculum, how long does it last?
So the state says they're going to do that, normally 5 years would be the short answer. And sometimes it's delayed for various reasons or whatnot.
See, I would have said 6.
Well, I'm just
Only
curious,
because
we're
that's
doing
makes
social
sense.
studies over the civics and all that stuff, because we wanna wait and see all of that.
So we're waiting 1 year,
That's
you
what I'm-
have to do it within 2 years. So
Okay.
this is the adoption year.
And it's
for
tied to
social
funding.
studies.
They give you the money to purchase the curriculum, and that money's good for 2 years.
Okay, so technically next year, let's just say they iron everything out, technically you could adopt it, the new 6
That's,
through 12.
that's what we're
civics.
doing, yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I'm concerned.
So the plan is to wait a year,
Okay.
so that we can further analyze the materials that are brought forward. And certainly, a big thought process is to ensure that we're in compliance with every rule and new piece of legislation that's brought forward. Certainly is, I don't think it's something that we could move quicker than that.
Mr. Daly, you had it.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Brodsky, it's also important to bear in mind, remember that education is under the purview of the state, not the federal government. So each state has their own standards. So a publishing company has 50 different versions of their textbooks. So when the state makes significant changes to a curriculum, like Florida has with civics and U.S. history, for example, or math, a couple of years ago, and so on, then it takes those publishers a little bit longer to align. So if what's happened in the past is if you go ahead and say, well, we're going to adopt, now is the year to adopt, but the changes were just made at the legislative level in that same year, what you get is a book that is not perfectly aligned to the standards that the students are going to be tested on. So for that reason, it makes sense to punt a year, wait it out, allow the publisher to align the standards in the textbook to what the students are going to be assessed on in the classroom. And it also gives us a chance to look at what some of the other districts are doing if they've already adopted it and see, did that work out for them, or do they regret it, which they've gone another path. We can have those conversations and make sure that we get a textbook that is more perfectly aligned to what our students need.
And just a question, I don't know whether to direct this to you, Mr. Brodsky, or to Mr. Daly, but when we're talking about high school level history classes, my hope, my expectation would be that we're relying more on original source documents and less on a textbook.
Yeah, the use of BBQs are extensive within our, within our curriculum and within our practice, and that is the comparison of primary source materials and the analysis, comparing and contrasting of those items. So yes, ma'am, that would be true. All right, so then that's a great segue on to the affiliation agreement with Emerson College. Okay, this is the University out of Boston. We do have 24 affiliation agreements, and I read that in the item, because I was like, I wonder how many colleges do we have an agreement with, and you guys know that I tend to elaborate on little factoids. That's a little fact, 24 colleges. Next is a proclamation for National School Counseling Week, and I'm here to tell you the importance of school counselors. School counselors are in high demand. It requires a master's degree to be a school counselor, and that's part of it. And they have so many roles that they play within our school system. One of the things that I always hear is about school counselors, and what they will tell you is that they spend so much time doing things other than talking to students, because their job is so vast in what they do, and that's true. Just to kind of give you an idea, we kind of rank around in the middle of the pack when it comes to student counselor ratios within the state, probably in the 20s, somewhere in the 67 counties. I will tell you that there are, when we post a counselor job, it's not filled right away. It's a challenging job to fill from a human resource perspective. So it is a tough job. So
Mr. Brodsky,
we should celebrate.
the master's degree requirement, is that a local requirement? Is that a state requirement?
I think that's a state requirement. Certain states. So next we have proposed allocation changes. You can see very few, some realignment, moving from a behavioral health to a general health assistant from Allen Elementary, a job title change, and then student needs at Lakeside Elementary and W.E. Sherry, so not much in that area. Next we have monthly financial reports for December. That's followed by budget amendment reports for December. Our deletion of certain items report. Then we have a bid renewal. The bid renewal is for the fire extinguisher and kitchen hood inspection maintenance. It goes to Commercial Fire LLC. It's a $45,000 contract to provide that service. Next is transportation bus purchase agreement. So in the vein of fun facts, okay, our buses travel 3.2 million miles a year, and because I know you want to know this, that's 128 times around the world.
Oh, wow.
That give you a perspective, right?
Truly.
So I know sometimes as a board member, you'll hear something and say, oh my goodness, a bus was late, or a bus was in an accident, because that does happen. Folks, if you travel 3.2 million miles, if you travel around the world 128 times in a year, is it possible you're going to be late? Is it possible that you're going to get into an accident? It certainly is possible when you put the scope and magnitude of that. So I was asked by a board member, I thought we bought all these buses in 2020. We did. We did have a purchase of 100 buses in 2020. And I think what happened then, well, actually it wasn't 2020, it was 2019, I believe, just prior to me. And I think what happened was we were trying to get to the point where we had air conditioning on all the buses, and we were gradually doing it. And then everybody said, we want it faster. Okay, so then we just converted the whole fleet. Well, you still have to replace buses along the way. Kind of like a bus lasts approximately 10 to 12 years, would be the average. When a bus reaches 150,000 to 200,000 miles, that's the time in which you're looking to find a replacement bus. So Obviously, we did an analysis of all buses, what their age is, how many miles they have, whether parts, one of the things that we have noticed is parts for buses, especially as they age with supply chain issues. That's another factor that goes into that. So really, as a district, we should be purchasing, at least 10 buses a year, probably closer to 20 a year, to have that cycle, to be able to go through and adequately update our buses. And so that's why you see the 10. And there is bad news here, right? So that all sounds logical. So the bad news is the price of buses has gone up significantly. It's about 150 grand for a bus if you're looking at a roundabout, cost for that. The same cost was close to just below 110. It was like 108, last time that we did this. So, when we looked at the cost of Park versus the cost of Doe, we saw that there, so it would make sense to me, and you probably see it in your homes too, right? Everything's kind of gone up, so the cost of the buses has also gone up.
Do these buses come with drivers?
I would like to be able to
Wash themselves too.
Let me know how we can get that accomplished. That's nice.
So I
Are
would
they
say-
AI buses? Are they self-driving?
Yeah.
Tesla buses? Tesla.
Let's work on that.
I would say this, do we have all the bus drivers that we need? No, right? But one of the things I always do when people get, frustrated is you have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, right? And then you have to start doing a little bit of comparison, like, what is your situation compared to everyone else's situation? And I would like to commend Mr. Crawford and his staff for doing a really good job in difficult circumstances. I think we went to, and I know I'm gonna mess up the numbers, I think we went from 24 double packs, we're down to 4, and almost getting rid of that.
Let's say we're actually down to 2 now. We had 2
Two.
more drivers.
We're down to 2.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we are right there. Does that eliminate the issue? No.
I think we might need a school bus driver academy in our CTE program.
Well, they could get their
CDL license.
Yeah, don't they have to be?
That should be something that they get.
Well, actually, I think that's what the driver
Do we have that?
registry, so.
We
Yeah.
don't have that for high school students, but I will say
drivers.
this, one of the things we saw
Safe.
was we would train them getting their CDL, and they would leave, go work for Target or somewhere else after they got free training. So
Yeah.
so there's little nuances.
Can't we can sign a contract? Like, we'll pay for your CDL and then you have to serve for like a year or two.
Oh,
so that might be
That's one way we attract them. There's still 1,900 bus driver openings in the state of Florida, so we're down to that point now. And you can certainly chime in, Randall. That means we have the minimum number of drivers in order to cover all the routes so you don't do double packs. The challenge is if people call in sick, then you're missing that driver. So every morning, the first thing I do when I roll over is I press my red phone, my school phone, and see if Randall's name pops up. That's like step one. Like before I even get out of bed, I roll over.
We're gonna do that with him too.
Oh, Randall's not here. Good. It's gonna be a good day, and I get up from there, right? So yeah, I mean, if everybody were to show up for work and nobody be sick, and I'm not denying that people get sick and all that kind of stuff, I understand all that. But the reality is we're really close there, but there's always that issue that's gonna happen if numerous people call out sick. For example, the Friday before Florida, Georgia is a day, that kind of thing does happen in an organization driven by people. Or people business is what we do, right? So all that's going on. So that was a long story to tell you. We need to buy buses. This is something that you approve in the educational, the facilities plan. Here it's in there, it's already been approved, but the purchase of the bus, the contract's on here.
When we bought that 100 buses, we didn't necessarily buy ESC buses then either, did we? As I
There
recall.
was 10. That was in that
10 at
100,
that
yeah.
time? Okay.
And that was a lease to own, correct?
Lease
Right.
purchase. Lease purchase.
Lease to purchase, right.
So each year you'll see a purchase of these. We would like to have a replacement schedule for that be included in the EFP, as well as an individual contract because of the size. Okay, next we have pre-qualification of contractors. Nothing remarkable there. Next, we have the substantial and final completion of our high school's roof. And we have a couple of exciting days with that project. Next is Neptune Park on the property of Thunderbolt Elementary School. The Board of County Commissioners wants to build a storage shed and electricity going out there because we own the property and they lease it. They need permission from us in order to do that, and that's essentially what this item.
Can I ask a quick question? Is that okay, Thunderbolt sits here, and then there's a road next to it, and it's across the street?
It's the baseball field.
No,
Thank you.
across
Got
the
it.
street is the YMCA.
Thank you.
Those are the
I was
YMCA.
getting those two.
You got it.
I got it.
Neptune is directly behind them.
It's a beautiful facility. If you've never watched a baseball game there,
It is.
it's really outstanding. Next is the change order for Orange Park High School Stadium repair and replacement. So, I gasped a sigh of panic, when I saw this, in the sense that a couple things. One, I really focused on the idea that the stadium will be built prior to graduation. Graduation's a monumental event in a young person's life, and so proud to report that the stadium will be there, the seating will be there, but part of this is the infrastructure behind the stadium where people sit dealing with the restrooms and other stuff. So we'll have a plan to deal with that for the graduation ceremony itself. There will be seating there, but the final project will not be completed until the summer. When you have infrastructure that's older, things happen along the way, unintended consequences as you move forward in the project, and that's really related to here. I am proud of the work that's being done there because we really had no choice when it came to the stability of the stadium. It was repaired several times in an attempt to manage it, and eventually you reach a point where you have to. 1959, if I'm not mistaken, is Orange Park High School, so it's up there. Next, we have Wilkinson Elementary, their kitchen cafeteria renovations, and the awarding of the contract for that work. Next is the change order for Clay High restroom renovations. That's followed by Ridgeview Elementary roof repair and cafeteria renovations, and the awarding of the contract there. Next is approval to advertise and notice a public hearing on amendments to School Board Policy 6.01. And this has to do with annual architect engineering selection and the amount on a continuing contract. What happens is the amount, the limit for that goes up statutorily. So right now, our policy is not in alignment with what the statute says. So the change in the wording is a simple one that would take care of this issue, hopefully forever. One that says, basically, the project limits not to exceed the statutory cost limits established by the statute. So this way, as the statute changes, okay, our policy would go in alignment with whatever the statute says. And so that seems like a good, sometimes when you're doing policy, in an attempt to be specific, you wind up, creating unintended consequences later on down the road relative to that. So that's what this item is.
Mr. Rossi, when the legislature sets that amount, is that for all public entities or just for school districts?
I'm not sure if this statute 287, I don't know if it applies to all public entities or just to districts. Do you know, Mr. Bickman?
I don't know, and I don't think 287's in my book.
That's okay.
It's
but-
all,
public.
it's all public.
All
It's
public
a part of
entities.
the state requirements for ed facilities and Florida statute 287.
So the county would have to follow the same rules.
Right.
Okay.
At one time, it was, we had a local policy at $500,000 when the statute was 2 million, and then we raised it to 2 million, and then the statute changes to 4 million. It just, this is simplifies things, as the superintendent says, that keeps us in alignment with the statute, so we do not have to continually adjust your local board policy. Again, remember this, all projects that we pursue with architectural engineering services will be listed in the EFP, and you're gonna be approving those projects in the EFP as well as contracts when they come forward. What a lot of people don't realize is if we limit ourselves to, like, for example, it's $2 million now, if a project comes in over that, then after we've selected, after the board member, the committee selected architect and engineering services, we go through that process, the cost comes in over that. Then we have to completely start over by state statute, rebid everything. It creates like a 3-month delay in getting projects done, and, you know, we only have a window. Those types of projects are usually like summer projects, you know, big roofing, the things that are not gonna be disruptive to the educational process. So when you delay something 3-4 months, we have a 10-month window of school, and you have 2 months in the summer, it can delay things unintentionally up to a year. So just being consistent with the language, we will always be in compliance with the statute, and everything will always be approved through the board, through the EFP, and the contracts that come forward after that.
So this is just, it sets a cap on the amount of money that a continuing contract can be held.
Just for
So if it
architects.
exceeds, just for architects and engineers, if it exceeds that dollar amount, then by state statute, it has to go out to bid again?
To start
Or
over.
RFP? Okay, thank you.
Okay, that completes the consent agenda, and then there's 2 discussion items. One is the renewal of the RFP for field maintenance, and the 2 companies, Agro and St. John's Turf Care, are on there.
Yes,
You wanna say
that,
anything?
AgriPro is family owned and operated, so I will be recusing myself from that vote.
And that's
I don't
the
think
reason
there'll
why
be any
we do
question
this
this time
discussion.
about that one either.
If not, we'll have a full boardroom, I'm
We
sure.
certainly will. We did last time.
And then the last discussion item is the public hearing to advertise Spring Park Elementary attendance zones. It's the actual public hearing for that. If you recall, let's go back and visit and remember all the events here. We met as a board, we looked at 4 options, we chose option B, and Mr. Lance Addison gave a great presentation. We mailed letters to all affected people, obviously 700 and some odd letters were sent out to families. There was a couple of news events on that. I know News4Jax as well as some others, trying to show all the public information that we put out. So we mailed you a letter. We had a community meeting on the 17th, I believe it was. All 5 board members were in attendance at that meeting. We listened to concerns of individuals, and now this is the time for the final vote. Now, I would also want to kind of provide context for the board on the final vote. Once the final vote happens, then of course we quickly turn around to figure out the allocations and the attendance zones for each of the schools that are impacted. Right? Because then we have to turn around and do that. We bring to the board in March an allocation package that would be reflective of a new school. There's not going to be 42 schools on the allocation package, it's going to be 43. Right? And that means the reduction of force at some schools, the reduction of the number of teachers, personnel at some schools, and then the addition of Spring Park Elementary. So all of that work is done on a timeline by which we go ahead and we'll post the jobs for that right after the March meeting. Spring Park Elementary gets an earlier jump than everybody else in the hiring process. And then it's posted, all jobs are posted for all employees by April 15th. So I guess what I'm trying to point out to you is that this is kind of a tight timeline. Where we are in the process is, It's pretty much very straight, from A to B, it's a very straight line, okay, in this whole process. Tiffany Outman was, will be on the, I believe it's on this agenda, the actual name will be on there, principal of the new school, current principal of Lake Asbury Elementary. We're excited about opening new school. We're on time, right now for the opening. If you drive by there, you can see it. Definitely has taken form and taken life. So we're looking forward to that. And of course, this is the vote, because right after this, then we would start communicating with families. We start reaching out to them and say, hey, congratulations on being an owl. Here's some new information, because now there's going to be some new information, right, to kind of welcome them in. Is it probable that every person affected will be happy? The answer is no, it's not probable. Okay, is it possible? Sue would say yeah. She's very positive. Right? So that's kind of what we need to remember. I think we did a good job of quelling down any questions that folks had. And if you send out, 700 plus letters, and we certainly listen to and value the concerns of the 5 or so families that were at the meeting. We move forward from there. Okay, that completes the agenda for the meeting. Any questions on that? So then the second item on the agenda for this was a discussion of the board on levels of service. So to kick this off, I'm going to, the level of service is the capacity of each one of our schools. And we have an interlocal agreement related to that and set at 110%. So I think a good start of this would be just a discussion in which we have a presentation that kind of shows what this is, the impact, the benefits, the challenges with this, so the board can provide some direction at the end of that. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Madam Chair, thank you. Welcome this brisk morning outside. I'm Floridian. Born and raised, even though I left for many, many years, I came back here because of, didn't want to have 34-degree weather in the morning, but I guess that's where we're at right now. So level of service, I'm going to try to make this interesting. It's kind of like teaching the quadratic formula. It's not the most interesting thing in the world to teach, however, I'll do my best. So our objectives for today, we're going to define level of service, the purpose, statutes, the interlocal agreement that covers it here in the county and the district, and the Clay County 2040 comp plan. And the PSFE is the public schools facility element. The benefits of level of service, the issues that we have with our level of service, the board policy, whether we can change or not, and the recommendation. So what is level of service? It's a standard established to indicate the maximum utilization of public facilities and service. So within the county and within the district, we have facilities and service. We have fire, we have police, we have water, sewer. All of those have a level of service. We have roads. So all of those have a level of service. Can the population, can the roads, or can the schools, or can the fire, or can they handle the population? So level of service is set so that we don't exceed that maximum to where we're in duress as a county or a school district. So what is the purpose of it? The purpose for the school district is based on the adopted level of services to utilize student capacity to the greatest extent that we can. And this is a big deal. If concurrency is applied, and concurrency is applied here in the district, to ensure the standards are utilized to balance competing interests, preserve uniformity, and to avoid disruption to growth. Remember, we can't prohibit growth. By statute, we can't prohibit, okay? And it's to provide an equitable distribution of student enrollment district-wide. The Florida statute, I'm just gonna kind of breeze through this real quick, but it says, if you have concurrency, you must include an adopted level of service. So we do have concurrency, therefore, we have to have an adopted level of service that's agreed upon between the county and the school district. The interlocal agreement. Okay, so a little brief history on it. The interlocal agreement, it was September 1st, 2006. We adopted the interlocal agreement, and it's a long title for it. It's the Interlocal Agreement for Coordinated Planning, Public Educational Facility Siting, and Review for School Concurrency in Clay County. This was agreed upon in 2006, and then it was revised again in 2008. Well, why do we have it? Well, because in 2006, we said, okay, we're gonna have concurrency. Before that, we didn't have concurrency in the district. So in 2006, we said, all right, we're gonna follow the state statute, we're gonna ask for concurrency. So therefore, when we started implementing concurrency in the county, then we had to establish a level of service based on the state statute. Why do we not have concurrency before that? I can only speculate as to we adopted concurrency because of the rapid growth in the Oakleaf area. And the Oakleaf area probably overwhelmed the schools, and we needed to figure out a way to stop the growth from overwhelming the area at that time. So that's my speculation on why, and I got a little bit more insight into it. But basically, Section 13 of that says that we're going to establish a level of service of 110%, and that was agreed upon between the district and the county for each public school for the school concurrency service area. That's a zone. Basically, that's a long word for a zone. Okay. The history. So the history, I didn't know a whole lot about the history, so I had to have some folks that we work with that have been around a long time. They made some phone calls for me to individuals that worked here a long time ago that were in charge and say, hey, why do we do what we do? Why do we do this? And so it's always been 110%, even before we had concurrency. So it was already there, it just wasn't written. And then whenever we adopted concurrency and implemented concurrency, then we made it official to where it is 110% now. So that's why it is 110%. And there are reasons why that was, and I'll go over some of those reasons in just a few minutes. The 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The 2040 Comprehensive Plan is basically is the county's long-range plan. It goes for roads, it goes for everything that the county does, whether it be fire department, everything they do, they have to put in a comp plan. I don't know every element of the comp plan. Most of it doesn't apply to the district. I do know the public school facilities element of the comp plan that we have, and it basically just echoes the interlocal agreement that said the county hereby adopts 110% level of service standard for each public school. So it must be in the comp plan, it must be in an interlocal agreement by Florida statute. So what are the benefits of having 110%? Well, the benefits, it provides a 10% capacity buffer. And when we reached out, we asked, why did we do what we did? And this was the exact answer. It provided a buffer. It gave us flexibility. If the schools were overwhelmed at 100%, it gave us a little bit of flexibility in there to not have to react so fast, okay? So it lessens the fiscal challenge. It allows more time. It gives us time. It basically buys us time to collect more impact fees, taxes, to be able to fund the new schools or the addition to schools or the permanent student capacity that we might need in a certain area. So that's why we have that 10% buffer. It's given us the flexibility to manage the schools, especially in the high growth areas, which at one time was Oakleaf, and now we're experiencing the high growth in the Lake Asbury, Green Cove area, as we all know. It, you know, Redistricting, that's a fun thing. I probably have to wear my, when I was fighting wars back when all this was implemented in 2006 and prior to that, I probably, I had my Kevlar vest and everything. I probably have to take that out of the storage to go through all this redistricting because it's a fun thing. Anyway, it delays the need to redistrict immediately, okay?
Mr. Addison, do you
Yes.
have enough for the board members and the superintendent tomorrow?
You guys, I get to take it once where I'm stepping out of the Humvee first and I take all the initial shots and you guys get them coming out behind me.
We're on the armored car behind you, we're not coming out.
Exactly. Yeah, you never want, see, I get the hard part because you never want to be first out of the Humvee. Those are the ones that take all the initial shots. But it allows us to maximize the capacity in the schools that we have. And so there are several benefits to having the 110%, and especially that buying the time, having the buffer. Are there issues with it? Sure, there are issues with it. The state recommendation says, well, if you have concurrency, we recommend 100%. And if you have relocatables, we recommend 100%. That's a recommendation. However, it also, the state it goes back and forth. And says, we recommend 100%, however, you can adopt the level of service that you would like. We could adopt 150% if we want to. We would have to go back and forth, but that's what we came to. So it kind of says one thing, and then it says, well, kind of do what you want and adopt a level of service in your comp plan and in your interlocal agreements. One of the issues that I foresee, if we were to try to change it, is we have a very long-standing agreement, obviously since 2006, with the school board, the Board of County Commissioners, Orange Park, Town of Orange Park, the City of Keystone Heights, City of Green Cove. It's been around for 17, 18 years now. So trying to get that changed, it would probably be an obstacle. It prohibits growth and development, the DRT. The DRT is what we call a development review table. It spans probably as long as concurrency has spanned, and it's a living document that I deal with basically on a daily basis. From the beginning, the DRT has been based off of 110%. So to take that math and knock it down to 100%, now we have, I wouldn't even know. I would have to go and do a long analysis of how many negative seats we would have in the county. So it would really, really throw that off substantially to do that. And the prop share mitigation agreements, if we go down to a threshold of 100%, then we don't have that buffer. Now we go into prop share on basically everything, especially in the Lake Asbury area. We'll have to go into prop share mitigation for basically every time a developer comes in to ask for concurrency in that service area. And also, yes?
Why is the prop share mitigation a negative?
It's not necessarily a negative. It just creates more legalities. I guess that's all it is. It's not so much of a negative as it delays.
Okay.
It delays everything for them. So it's just a legality of it.
Was there a financial impact to the district to go the prop share mitigation route versus?
So the prop share mitigation is, how do I explain that? It's proportion of the seats that they will use. However, all it really is, if you break it down, it's prepayment of your impact fees.
Right.
That's all it really is. So they just prepay the impact fees, but what it causes to do is it's a legal binding agreement with that developer that says you will build these seats in this area. So it kind of forces our hand a little bit. So
And since it can't be denied, prop share is just one of three options that they have available to them. Of course,
Right.
Proportionate share mitigation. And by the way, proportionate always means it never pays. It's only a proportion. So it doesn't pay for the cost of what we have to do to
So
do
here's a
it.
question. If you're going the PSMA route and you get your impact fees up front, and building costs escalate, the price of homes escalates, you're actually getting less money than you
Correct.
would have
That's
if they had
correct.
paid the impact
Exactly.
fees when they were due.
Correct.
Okay, that was
So
what
they
I was
want to
asking,
do
if
it,
there's
that's why
a
they,
financial.
to their advantage
Yeah.
to do it.
They'd rather do it early
Right.
because it's just gonna be more
They-
expensive later.
Right, they
Good for
always,
them.
if we don't have concurrency, or I deny concurrency, because I've been denying a lot of concurrency, I am not very popular in the county right now with developers, I promise you that. But when I deny concurrency, they push really, really hard to get the prop shares through. All right, let's get it through, because obviously, the longer they wait around, the more expensive things get, so they have an opportunity. But as you know, as Dr. Kemp just mentioned, sometimes a prop share agreement might be for $600,000 or $800,000. We can't build a wing for that amount of money. So it kind of puts us at a disadvantage to where they say, all right, you need 30 seats, okay? Here's your money for 30 seats, now make it happen. So it kind of forces our hand, and that's where it becomes an issue.
So you're saying if you change it to 100%, you can't do that anymore?
It will accelerate it to where we have to do many more of them. Yes, we will have to do it many more of them.
Right,
Right.
It's just gonna be annoying, because you have to do.
It's not necessarily more annoying, it'll force our
Well, I
hand
mean-
more, yeah.
It'll cost.
No, that's my job.
I know, I probably
Yeah.
should have directed it that way.
Yeah.
I meant like you're just gonna have to,
We'll get less money.
I was
The
gonna
more
say,
that they do that,
right,
the less money we get for development.
right, and the more schools we have to build,
Correct.
Or create alternative space.
or create. yeah,
Use
well,
more portables, essentially.
well, that's what I'm saying. So here's the thing, I thought changing this to 100% would cause us to not have to do portables.
Mm.
And cause us, because here's the thing, so because you don't have the room, well, the option would be to build a school versus implanting a portable,
With
right?
what money?
Yes,
That's
but,
correct, but that would
But
force us.
then don't you negotiate, you can't negotiate, you still have to use your formula for the prop share?
I have to, correct. By state statute, I have to come with an estimated cost per student station. And my cost per student station that I came up with, estimated, and I used relevant data to come up with that, the mathematical formula that I use, and it's pretty expensive. It's probably more expensive than St. John's or Duval. But I'm legally allowed to do that. I can come up with an estimated cost based on the cost that we build schools, the data that the state comes out with that they've built schools over the course of a year or two ago. And some of that data is 2 years old. So I could probably even, if the new data comes out, I can make that formula even more and make the cost per student station even more. However, with that being said, if I'm short 10 students and my cost per student station is $50,000, obviously we don't get enough money to build a whole wing of the school.
So I guess my question is what makes the extra 10% make it to where they can do that?
What do you
Where
mean, they make it, wait.
Impact fees and whatnot. Why does it make it, if you change it from 100, or from 110 to 100, where you don't have time, where you don't have all that?
Mhm.
What states that? Is it the statute that states that now you don't have the buffer, that you don't have all of these other things?
No, it's not necessarily that we don't have,
time
so what happens is, let's say, I can only use an example to try to explain it. Let's say I had 110%, but now, so that gives me more student stations in that service area or for that school, right? So if I went down to 100%, then I would have less student stations to be able to deal with the developers with. Okay, by having that 10% buffer, it gives me more student stations to be able to either grant concurrency, and if we grant that concurrency, then we don't go into prop share mitigation.
Does that make sense? Like,
Right, but I'm just wondering, because back on this other page, I guess I should have asked it right when you were going over it, because that's how my mind operates. Okay, like you provide 10%, okay, I guess that's what you're talking about. And then, the flexibility and all of that, it's just because you don't have the numbers.
Correct.
So it's a number.
Yeah, it's a numbers game,
versus the
absolutely,
statute or
absolutely.
something. That's what
Yes,
I'm
yes.
asking. Okay.
so if we drop it to 100%, that gives him less seats to work with, which forces us into more of these Because that's what the villagers are asking. Do you have seats for the students for the houses that we're about to build? If the answer is no, then we go into
Prop share.
one of these
Or you
options.
have
One
to
of the
build
three.
space.
Right, or you have to,
One of the three.
but it would always be no if we were at 100%. You wouldn't have overcrowding schools, but you wouldn't have the numbers.
That-
To get
that's-
more money, right?
I don't think that's necessarily true, that we wouldn't have overcrowded schools, for the simple fact that we can't stop the growth.
Right.
We cannot legally stop the developers from coming in and asking for concurrency. So one way or another, if they ask for concurrency, one way or another, whether it's through prop share or we grant concurrency, we still have to somehow or another come up with mitigation options or grant concurrency for them, whether it be for prop share, and then that kind of pushes our hand.
And it doesn't matter if you're at 100% or not.
Does it matter?
If you're, so if we change this to 100% and they come in and you're like, hey, I'm at 100%, you still have to do the PSMA.
Yes, yes.
So it doesn't matter.
No, it does not matter if I don't have seats available.
So prop share mitigation, the developer can build the school themselves, not gonna happen.
Well, how
Or-
does St.
or
John's
contract-
County get away with that?
or
How do they make their developers come in and build all their schools? And it's not charter schools, it is schools.
They're not building their schools.
They're bonding it.
There may be a few, but not all.
Not
Because
all,
they are
but
still-
a good chunk of them, that's what I'm saying.
Well, they have higher impact fees.
And they
It goes
also
by
have
square
like
footage.
academies or K through
K
6 or
through 8.
whatever, but
K
still,
through 8, yeah.
in some areas, they're, smaller, but they have them like in every
My guess
neighborhood.
would also be that it's different developers than who's building here in Clay.
And don't forget about the component, the variable that controls this whole discussion, and that's revenue. They have a very different tax structure, revenue structure, the tourism, the St. Augustine, the waterfronts, the beaches, they have a whole different tax structure than Clay County. So if revenue was not an issue, you know, we could pursue whatever we wanted, but revenue has always been the issue in Clay, and affordability to build. So since we can't statutorily stop any type of growth, one of those three options kick in, and that is either proportionate share mitigation, which does not cover the cost, and we can end up losing on the long run by the time we get to build. They build the school, developer builds the school, which most at today's price choose not to, or they find another alternative solution, a charter school option or something of that nature, to contract with a private entity to do that on their property. Those are three options that are provided to them. But revenue is the main variable that has driven us to the situation we're in, and it will be, the revenue will continue to be the parameter that makes us look at options strategically moving forward.
And as we've talked about our legislative priorities going into the session, I think part of the conversation needs to be the unique situation that rural districts are in when we come into high growth.
Yep.
Because there is not an existing tax base to draw from until the growth that never fully pays for itself, but it kicks in a fair share, right? So I think that's one thing that makes us very different from St. Johns County. Their tax base is already so high that the additional growth is not as burdensome for their government bodies to pay for because they already have higher taxes.
And you've hit
But
However,
they
if you
are
speak-
paying for, I mean, they have an EFP just like we do,
Yeah.
they have a work
Yeah.
plan. You can go on and look at every county's on Florida DOE, and they have, I think they have like a $16 million bond that they're paying
And
off every year.
historically,
I
the
mean,
state has given an allocation for rural districts. I've seen it in the FEFP, and I'm not sure if it's something that they're still doing.
And they do special allocations for rural districts.
Right.
So there have been, and I remember Rob Bradley getting applauded by one of the smaller districts in our area, in his area,
Right.
that he fought for money for a high school. I mean, it was like one high school.
One school,
For
yeah.
the entire district.
Right.
And they got to rebuild it or build onto it or something.
Right.
But that had to be a special allocation.
I'd be remiss to say, I mean, at one time, Clay County was rural. We had
Right, it's not
43
anymore.
schools.
It's
We are
not.
no longer considered that as an option. We are actually one of the highest growth districts in the state. You hit the nail on the head, Madam Chair. if there was a pursuit of a lobbying action, it would be for the state to assist the high-growth areas
Yes.
with some type of
Well,
supplemental
and the
funding.
high-growth
That's,
inland counties of
Yeah.
Florida, because
Right.
waterfront property, oceanfront property makes such a difference in your tax base. So I think that would be one thing I would hope our lobbyists would talk to our legislators about, is that it's a unique impact when it is, when I say rural, what I should have said was non-coastal.
Exactly.
well, but the first thing the state looks at as well will be the leadership, the board's actions that they've taken to try to mitigate some of this. And I commend the board for the actions you've taken to follow the recommendation on the impact fees. I mean, to not maximize impact fees for 17 years has actually put us way behind the curve and being able to keep up with the growth and development. But they will look at the decisions of the leaderships, the boards, and say, have they maximized it? Did they maximize mill? Have you taken steps to do the impact fees? I think those things have to happen at a local level first before they would ever even consider any type of supplemental growth. Because if you're not doing what you can do as the leadership, then
Right.
it's not probable. It's possible, but not probable that they'll be tested for.
So Lance, I have a
Yes.
question. Just help me understand this.
Okay.
If you're not, so if you're doing more of the FSMAs, why would you not get more money if you're having to do it all the time? Even though we're technically,
So there's so many elements to
if
try.
we drop it to
Right,
100%,
right.
you know, you're doing it all the time, so therefore I feel like that would be more money so that you can implement, because you're having to do it, we've dropped it. So every time that they want to build, they have to come back to you and you can negotiate. Even though the number is lower, there's still,
We don't
That-
receive that
yeah.
money until
Yeah,
they
that's
start
a-
platting the land. So they
that's-
can say, yeah, we owe you $6 million. Like,
Right.
we're still waiting for $8 million at Shadowlawn, because they said, yeah, we're gonna build, we signed an $8 million agreement, but they haven't
That's-
platted yet, so we haven't seen any of that money.
Right, so that's kind of that was the point I was gonna make, is that the reservations we have to hold based on whatever the prop share may say. If it says, all right, you have to hold 400 reservations until we plat our first 1,000 homes. So I have to hold those reservations, however, they don't have to pay until final plat of those first 1,000 homes. We're in that situation with Saratoga Springs, we're in that situation with Governor's Park, we're in that situation around the Reinhold lands in Shadowlawn. So that can be 2028, 29 before we can actually receive those monies. However, I still have to hold those reservations and take up those reservations for those schools. So we're not necessarily receiving that money right off the bat.
well, and then that doesn't technically, I guess what I'm saying is, like those reservations and stuff, that doesn't really, I mean, that's different from the 100%, right? Impact
No,
fees
not
and
at all.
stuff.
The reservations take up or give me that leeway up to 100%, 110%.
Okay.
So that we don't
So
have
you
to
can
write those prop
negotiate
shares.
with
Right,
numbers.
exactly.
Okay,
Mhm.
I guess that's what I'm trying to.
And what are the-
It's
what-
mainly keeping the 110% is for negotiation purposes and more money in the long run.
Well, I mean, you can look at it like that, but honestly, it really does give that buffer. It's not necessarily only with the review table. It's also with the schools that are close to 100%. For example, Patterson is at 101. If we didn't have that 110%, we would have had to react much earlier. And I think Patterson's been lingering around 100% for quite a while now, and we've had that time to be able to build that school, to be able to relieve Lake Asbury and relieve Patterson all at the same time. If we didn't have that little buffer that we have there, then we would have had to react much faster, which would have cost much more money. We might not have had that money to pay for that school.
Well, and if I may, when you have that 110%, and when you look at a year and look at our schools in one given year, you'll see a lot of the schools at 100%, 89%, 90%, 105%, whatever. And within a year, and I'm looking at the city of Keystone Heights, within a year, that can change.
But what
And
if you
if we-
increase the population and change it to 100%? Is that still gonna matter? So
Wait, say
gives
that
you
again?
the capacity, if you change the capacity of the students moving forward with building, that's still your student stations, right?
Our capacity is our capacity, so
But don't you go off of, isn't that your student stations?
right, you're
So let's
correct.
just say if it's for 2,000 students,
Mhm.
and let's just lower it to 100%, that gives you your buffer back.
But you'd have to have 2,000
You
student
have to
stations.
have stations then.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Build
But
bigger
my-
schools.
But it goes off of cafeteria size, right?
Not always.
Well, it depends, it's the lesser of either or. So, yeah, it depends on how many,
It could, yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
it
the
gives you
lesser
your
of.
buffer.
Yeah, it's the lesser of.
Is what I'm trying to say, and it keeps these builders, in the long run, if you do that, in my mind, you're gonna get more money. Because you're gonna negotiate with them, you're gonna build bigger schools, it's gonna suck for your existing school, or stink for your existing schools, but, because, you know, you'd have to maybe rezone or whatever, but moving forward, if you have capacity, right? And then you lowered it to 100%, that gives you your buffer back moving forward and fixes your previous
Okay, but
pages issues, right?
point, devil's advocate here.
I'm just trying to comprehend if you did it that way, would it work that way? Would it give you your
I
buffer
don't
back,
see
is
how
my
it would give the
question.
buffer back. I don't see how taking away
Because it
that 10%.
gives you your numbers back.
It doesn't, our numbers, our capacity is capacity. That's determined by fish. So that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily change the numbers. The numbers won't change. What it does is it allows us a few more seats to go over
Right.
that capacity. It doesn't change our numbers.
I see what you're
Guess we're
saying.
not-
I see what you're
You
saying.
get what I'm
I
saying?
get what you're saying, but,
Okay.
but my concern is if you have a school that's, 2,000 student capacity, you have to fill that school to 2,000 seats.
Well,
Period.
and my thing is.
Before you could ever build another
This
school.
is another issue, being proactive instead of reactive. You see this growth coming, right? We already, at $40 million, had we changed the capacity for Spring Park, let's just say, for example, the majority of our schools, when we fill them, are already overfilled or at capacity when we fill them. So our fix is to plant a portable, and not always, but the majority of the time, that is our fix, is to plant a portable. Had we built a bigger school at $40 million, that's a couple $100,000 more versus, okay, well, in about 5 years, 3 years, this area is overcrowded now, we have to build a school over here for another 40 million or 60 million by the time that this
So,
economy gets, right?
Historically, yes, that's how we've handled it, but I would say in the
We haven't
last,
since Doe and
But aren't they at capacity now, or close to capacity?
but we have
Right.
not looked at portables as an option. We
Well,
have
that's what
not
I'm just saying,
considered-
like, what are you gonna do when that?
If they're not there,
Is
if the
that
portables are
capacity?
not there, then there's no capacity. So we
Well-
don't add the portables, that's where but if
so
you have a
to
school,
redistrict or you
Right.
could-
Well, that's my point, why would you do that if you already have room?
capacity is determined by either the size of your cafeteria or the number of seats you have in the school, in the classrooms, whichever is lower.
Lesser.
So if you have a large cafeteria, but you only have X number of desks, then your capacity is still lower. Does that make sense?
Right, but I'm just saying you would have the room, so at $40 million up front, you're already building it. So when you are at capacity, instead of adding a building later on at $8 million or whatever, you could have saved money by increasing capacity right then at the beginning of the build.
I see what you're saying.
Versus down the road, when you're like, oh, we have a growth problem.
No, I see
What
what
are we
you're
gonna
saying.
do?
But
And you save taxpayer dollars and district money.
But my contention with that is the trade-off is we now have a high school for 2,000 or 2,500
There's an
students.
educational
and there's-
factor that goes into it.
Correct.
also.
I'm not saying you have to completely fill it,
You
which.
do though.
Yeah, you do.
You do, but at the
And
same
there's the
time-
rub. There's the rub, you do have to fill it.
Because you have
And,
to.
and that's the state, that's where the state
Regulated by the
comes in
state.
and says, no, you can't do
Well, I'm not
that.
saying, I mean, it doesn't have to be
It makes
2,000,
sense.
but my point is
makes
raising
sense.
it, because you're already overfilling them anyway. I mean, you're already, 107%, 104%, 102%.
Those are projections. Those are
Okay,
projections.
Right, but still, we're already overfilling them anyway.
But
Well-
that's
That's my
how you,
point.
that's
So-
how you
There's a lot of
justify
schools that
building
are
a new
under
school.
capacity.
Look at
There
the
are
wrong
some
part.
that are under capacity, but I'm just saying, you've got high schools, Middleburg High, where's Middleburg High? Aren't they at over capacity?
They're right at.
Yeah,
They're right at
Well, we
capacity.
do.
But they're right at cafeteria
But they haven't
capacity.
even developed.
And they're right at
Yeah.
cafeteria capacity, and we're expanding the cafeteria this summer, if I'm not mistaken. So we will accommodate 680 more seats, if I'm not mistaken.
Here's
So,
another
yeah.
example. Think about the community of Fleming Island. How long have they cried out for a junior high school?
right.
The state
And the
will not
numbers won't-
allow us
right,
to
it's
build
a
one
redistricting and all that
because
stuff.
there's capacity at the existing.
Right.
So what you run into if you have a ginormous high school with all of these seats, then you cannot build a high
2,000 as
school.
an example, but
I see what you're saying, but like you've got to think about the full picture. You know what I'm saying? Like all of the trickle down impacts that you would have if you adjusted the capacity.
so you
It's
wanna
not
keep
just
lower
about
numbers so that you have the opportunity to build more schools ultimately.
I think I think level of service and school capacity, I think those are two different things that we're talking about here. Level of service is just, it doesn't matter the size of the school, it's the capacity of the school, and whether it be 110% or we have that 10% buffer. It doesn't have anything to do with what we build schools at. I think there's two different issues that we're speaking of right now.
It'd be great if, it would be great if all schools grew at the same rate and the capacities, but these hotspot problems that, where the high growth is, first thing the state's going to do, and we can't even, people have said, even when we looked at redistricting for Discovery, why don't you just build another school in the area where the growth is? As long as there's available capacity in the district, I think right now there's 2,800, about
2,400.
2,500 available seats in the grade range. They're just not in the right places. As long as there's capacity in the district, the state will say, no, you can't build new, and you must rebalance to maximize capacities at all your schools. And that's kind of something that it's always last resort been trying to avoid that when you can. Of course, our neighbors across the street are having to do it 2-3 times a year now because of the growth. They don't have a choice. These hotspot capacities, where there's 100, 110, where there's 150, these high growth areas require action at some point, and you can't just build another school in the area as long as there's capacity somewhere else. So to your point, could you build a bigger school that would have a higher seat capacity? Yes, if you've maximized capacity district-wide somewhere else. Yes. Can you expand the cafeteria size to increase serving student capacity if the property can accommodate more students? Like we have a lot of our properties that are landlocked right now with existing permanent and relocatables, so you couldn't even expand. If you expanded the cafeteria, you wouldn't have a place for space. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. But to your point, yeah. Could you increase capacity by larger schools? Absolutely, especially in the cost of schools today. It's one of the reasons we can't do $40 million elementary schools 1.5 miles apart. And one of the reasons we made the recommendation to this board that we bump elementary, I can't remember the Two Creeks property, and we bumped those elementary because we had schools 1.5 miles, 2 miles apart. We have to be strategic with the lack of revenue and being behind the curve of revenue to make sure we're maximizing the build. So the next build we would be looking at would be a K-8 for the first time in the Saratoga Springs area to maximize, to do exactly with the limited dollars without having to go hopefully not having to go significantly in debt through bonds to pay for these schools. That's my concern, is how are we going to fund a K-8 and a high school? We're looking at $200 million in need for those two projects, and impact fees don't cover it. Proportionate share mitigation strategies will not cover the whole. So we'll be looking to our CFO down there to say, what are our strategies to fund for the growth, right? And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we play with every day. And where we can maximize space, we will with cafeteria expansion. The goal is not to increase portables. The flexibility with the 110% allowed the district for years to move portables around based on where high growth hotspots were. Unfortunately, in the process, that was the most economical way, the only way they could afford, and that's how we ended up with the numbers we have.
So board policy on the level of service, there's no board policy for level of service. all the borough policy states is if we are over capacity or in duress, then we have these options to mitigate those issues. And the state, the board policy says we can do this, and the state said, well, you can also do this too. So they kind of align with each other, but there are more options with the state also. But just to reiterate, there is no level of service in board policy. It's in the interlocal agreement and the 2040 comprehensive plan. All right. So status right now, we have one school above LOS, that's Doe, and we're going to have to look at that. And we have 3 schools at or above, in between the 100 and the 110. We have Lake Asbury, Patterson, and Ridgeview Elementary. 2 of those will go down to below the 100% threshold in August when we open it up. Can we modify? Can we bring it down to 100%, 100%? Possibly. So with the interlocal agreement to modify the LOS, we have to transmit to all of the local entities, all of the municipalities and the county, with the data and analysis to support the change by resolution. So we would have to come up with a resolution, transmit that resolution over to all the entities, and they have 45 days to respond to our resolution to say they want to, and then they have to say whether they want to change the interlocal agreement. All agree to the interlocal, all 6 factions have to agree to the new interlocal agreement, and they all have to change their comprehensive plans. So all of that would have to be changed and fully executed before we could go to 100%.
So as we escalate the need to build or need to provide permanent space, their challenge would be escalating infrastructure, water, electric, roads, fire service, police service. That would be their challenge.
So it is possible to change, but everybody has to be in agreement to change, all 6 entities. So the recommendation, reducing the level of service to 100% at this time. At this time, it will accelerate the need to mitigate any overages that we have. So we have to accelerate and mitigate faster. It will cause the schools to reach the LOS threshold, which now will be at 100%. So they will reach that threshold faster, much faster. We'll have to build schools at a faster rate. Then we don't have the opportunity to save the money as far as the taxes and the impact fees because we don't have that buffer. And it has an opposite effect. By increasing the need for temporary space in schools, it would actually increase the need because we don't have that buffer to where we might, for the temporary space, whether it be leasing or, I know that we do not want to buy portables anymore, so I know that for a fact, but it would have the opposite effect and cost the district possibly more money in the short term. So the recommendation is to continue to monitor, and because we're in such a high growth period right now, maybe look at this in the future whenever we're not slammed with growth, because growth is cyclic. As you can see, growth is cyclic. It will calm down, and whenever it calms down, maybe we can look at this again in the future. Any more questions of me?
So I would just kind of add too, when it comes to this portable reduction, Doe has no portables there, no portables at Spring Park, a reduction of portables at Patterson, a reduction of portables at Keystone as a result of their new bill. So we are going to, obviously chip away at that problem, but it seems to me like going from 110 to 100 might increase the need for additional classroom space. And that's exactly what happened to folks long before us, and the reason why portables came in is because it was the most economical way to fill the gaps.
And just for a point of reference, back when that was an easier option, just to provide additional temporary space to solve the problem in lieu of redistricting or rebalancing, whatever you want to call it, it used to be very economical to move a relocatable. Like you could do it for $10,000 to $12,000, and that used to include ramp, stairs, electrical hookup, and plumbing if it was required for that age level, age appropriate portable for the elementary age. Now, to move a portable, it's 50,000 minimum to move portables and reset them up with ramp, stairs, electric, water, permits to cross railroad tracks. It's extremely expensive. Actually, it's gotten to the point that it's more cost effective for us. If we can't locate someone that would like to buy the portable for $1 and pay to move it's cost prohibitive to move them. So it's actually more cost effective for us to raise them, to tear them down and remove them as they come out of service. And that's probably, there's a cost for that as well. So it's an interesting, I see the more you learn about the portables and how we got to where we were and why we got to where we were, I think it's just people that were just trying to deal with it the best way they could, minimizing revenue strategies, minimizing upsetting stakeholders and constituents with the need to continually rebalance. It was just a simple, cost-effective way to do it. It is no longer cost-effective to do.
Well, and I think it was a different time in Clay County. While there was growth, it wasn't rapid growth. And it was, we were considered a rural school district. So the tax base has historically been even much lower than what we're experiencing now. So I think there were a lot of factors that went into why that was the solution implemented at that time.
A lot of districts moved away from purchasing their own portables. They do lease. If you lease, interestingly, if you lease a portable, it does not count against your capacity, which always creates the need with the state to be able to build a facility. But if you own your space, it counts against your capacity, even if it's a portable, relocatable space. That's something people don't realize. Like, so in scrimmaging with St. John's and how they've been dealing with their growth, they do not own
They're portables.
their relocatables. They lease,
see them,
they have
but
leased
you
them
don't-
all along. That way,
That's smart.
that's why they can build so often. Even though we just looked after that was brought up, but I just looked and looked at their debt service.
That's the question
You don't
I had.
want
What is their debt
You don't want
service?
their debt service, that the payments they're paying for that, but, they lease their portable, so therefore it doesn't count against the planner's capacity. So there's always a demand with the state. You're allowed to build, you meet the threshold to build something new, if you lease your portables.
Other questions?
I think we're good.
So one final discussion that's on the agenda has to do with a recent court ruling. And it has to do with the use of facilities, restrooms by gender, by our students. And so it was brought to my attention, I bring it to the board because we act as a group of 5 in making such determinations. And it's been a long-standing practice in Clay County that if you were a male student, a biological male student at birth, use the male room, the male restroom. If you're a female, biological female at birth, you use the female restroom. And then we've always had the policy by which if there was an issue that a student had, that would be brought to the administration and an alternate accommodation be made. I can tell you as a principal, I've done this numerous times, and it could be something as simple as a student didn't feel comfortable with the size of the restroom. I remember one young man saying, hey, I don't want to use the restroom because there's always 30 people, in there and whatnot. Do you have another place I can get? We find another place for them to go, either a single stall, single room area. Had students with medical conditions where they needed a different restroom closer to where they were. Those kinds of things. So really the question that brought forward is whether or not we want a written policy to state that as a board. And that's only a determination that the board can make. So I throw it out there to the board for discussion and direction.
Well, I'll first defer to you two, and then I'll give
I
my
just
thoughts.
have a question. Have we had any problems recently?
We've not had any problems to my knowledge related to this particular issue.
Thinking through, I've never had anything come before
So Mary, do you want to wait till there's a problem to implement this? 'Cause
No.
that's the worst time and I don't ask that in like a direct way. I just mean, I think there's a misconception that, because I keep hearing this over and over and over and over again, that Clay County is exempt from so many things. Like, people think that, you know, it can't happen here, it won't happen here, we're a small town.
No,
we're
I
this,
don't
we're
agree
that.
with that at all.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, just addressing that, we're not exempt from anything, and in my own personal life, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, when you think things aren't gonna happen to you, they will. So, our job as a district, as a board, is to set policy and to protect our students. And all I would like to do is implement your practice into policy, a board policy, stating what we already have into a policy.
I'm fine with that.
So
I
that
mean, if it's
it's-
been historic practice, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
And we have we have the courts to back us, and we also have, the Department of Education to back us and the law, but it's being proactive in policy making and letting securing and protecting our students and safety. So that something like Virginia doesn't happen here, because again,
Okay.
we're not exempt.
I did some research after the last school board meeting on I think, what was the Virginia incident where a young man was wearing a skirt and accosted a young woman in the bathroom,
Right.
in the girls' restroom. And I don't see how a piece of paper or an agreement or a policy is going to prevent anything from happening. We have SROs in every one of our schools. God forbid anything ever happen in any of our schools. But there was an SRO in New Mexico. I mean, there are officers in all of the schools, to my knowledge, that have had school shootings recently. A 6-year-old recently. And I'm thinking, there are policies. There are books and books of policies, whether they are state, whether they are local, and I don't see how writing a piece of paper and truly, and I'm just gonna say it, calling out people who are going through personal changes, who have, and yes, we have students in our district that have personal identity questions. And from my understanding, and I cannot speak from a personal standpoint because rarely happens in elementary schools, but having worked with junior high students or worked with junior high teachers and administrators and high school administrators, this is a very personal situation that the families have been dealing with the administrators personally in each of these situations. Now, does that mean that a young man who does not have a sexual identity issue cannot hurt or accost a young woman? That a policy is not going to change that either.
But he's not
It
gonna do it in a
happens.
girl's bathroom, is all I'm saying. He's not gonna go
It's-
into a girl, and if,
Sure he will.
I mean,
If a
hopefully we
student-
can
if a
stop
student
that,
wants
because
to
we
do
have, well,
something,
no, 100%,
they're gonna do
but
it.
what I'm saying is we don't need to set it up to where, you know, you can go to the girl's bathroom if you wanna wear a dress today, or you can go to the boys' bathroom if you don't, but that's the thing. Sometimes it's not an issue that they're battling. Sometimes it's, what is the trend today? Oh, I can actually get away with doing this. This is how, I mean, when hormones are raging, when things are happening, not all of them think that way or are struggling. They sometimes are like, okay, well, tomorrow, you know, it's a trend, I'm gonna go do this. And sometimes, when they are thinking about doing alternative things, that would be an scapegoat. Oh, okay, well, I could just do this today and be able to use the girls' bathroom and do whatever I wanna do. There's not always, I know that sounds crazy to you, like people wouldn't think that or students wouldn't do
No,
that.
students do all
but
sorts
they
of crazy
do
things. I'm very much
crazy
aware of
stuff.
what they do.
Yes.
But I'm sitting here thinking, you know, we have to give credit to some of our students as well.
No, 100%.
If
We
a
live in a
student,
time.
if a guy comes in and says, well, today I'm wearing a skirt, so I'm gonna go use the girls' restroom, I feel strongly that most of our female students would look at them and say, not today or not, or something to that effect.
You would think.
Or would go to an administrator, or would go to a teacher.
But what if they pull the card, well, I decided last night that I want to be transgender today.
So they go to the girls'
But then next
bathroom
week,
and they have to go into
they're fine.
a stall, because girls' bathrooms only have stalls. They don't have urinals. And they have to go into a girls' bathroom and they have to do whatever they're going to be doing. And yeah, they might leave the door open or they might close the door, whatever. And they're going to come out and they're going in after a girl. So, and I guess my question then is, so is a policy going to necessarily protect a girl going in and seeing a guy in the bathroom?
Well,
Is a
but
policy,
teachers are
is
aware
a
and
piece
they
of
have that-
paper
But my
going
thing
to
is,
support
Mary, a
that?
lot of these teachers just want administration backing. That if they say, hey, you know what, you are playing these games right now, we need, you don't need to go to the bathroom, let's go take you to a single stall, or let's do this. But a lot of times, teachers are too scared to say anything because they're scared that they're gonna end up on the news as a conservative teacher who said, no, I'm protecting these girls. And that's what
They have to be
they're afraid of.
conservative. I think they can just say, why you act, I mean, I need
Well,
help
I mean, they
from
could be
principals,
anybody,
I
I'm
guess.
just saying, like, being strict in rulemaking, not necessarily a political party, that's not what I mean. I just mean, like, I believe that, you know, when you go to school, we're here for reading, writing, and arithmetic, not distractions, not fighting, not whatever. It has been for years on end that there is a girl on the bathroom and there's a boy on the bathroom, and that is the point. So that you can separate it from a health perspective and an ER perspective. I can tell you that what came through our door with certain things, and it wasn't all the time, but there were issues.
Mhm.
That is why we have a girls' bathroom and a boys' bathroom. And then if we want a single stall or they have issues or whatever, they can use the clinic bathroom or separate. I'm not saying that, hey, you can't use bathrooms because you're transgender. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is implementing a practice that already exists, being proactive, a practice. Because guess what? This board may not be here 10 years down the road, 4 years, 8 years down the road, but times are changing and it's moving and they're quickly headed to Florida.
This is not, times are generally not
Getting-
changing.
well, no,
because
they're getting- I
This
mean-
has been a topic that was here before I was on the board. And when Mr. Van Zant was the superintendent.
Yes,
And that
because of
was, I mean,
the
this is
law
a topic
change.
that has come up before, and at that point, the board chose not to do a policy of any sort. And the law was basically just determined for the state student, who is no longer a student, but
Well,
they've
there's a
just,
couple of cases, and
they
that's why
just
the
switched
Supreme
that
Court
one.
hasn't even touched it yet. Because it's been like 3 years, I think, that they won't even pick it up, there's multiple cases.
and it's, and I guess, it's funny because I just came out of Mayo, and used a restroom that was,
But that's a medical
family,
facility.
I mean, you know, it's
That's a
like.
medical facility. We don't have family bathrooms or,
So I think, if I might just
We have
interject.
non-gender bathrooms for a lot, I mean, in
Yes,
a
we
lot
do.
of the schools.
And those are
I mean,
single
a lot.
stall.
single stall.
And those are single stalls.
Single,
So
yeah.
I think I think let's take the hot topics of today out of it. And let's recognize that historically, we have had male bathrooms and female bathrooms, and we have had non-gender conforming bathrooms as well. The non-gender conforming bathroom is a single stall bathroom where you can have privacy, right? And then we have the male and the female for our male and female students. So take the political issues out of it. I think putting a policy out there that just states what we're already doing is not it's not a point of contention. We all agree that that's how it should be done, the way we've been doing it.
I just don't see the need, I mean,
Why don't
I
we want a
think-
policy?
I'm
I
thinking
guess that's my
policy,
question.
and it's something that we have to, first of all, draw up. We have to spend, how many days does it take? It's like 60 days for a policy, 30
About
days
that,
for a
yeah.
policy, something like that. And it's sort of like, I feel like it will become political.
There are other issues, if I may speak. You're talking about writing a policy because the law is with us. The law is not with you. The law in the 11th Circuit right now is so conflicting in the opinion that they wrote that I don't know what's going to happen to it. The 11th Circuit decided this case 3 times. The first 2 times, they said we agree with the Middle District of Florida in the middle. And the third time, the en banc says, we don't like that opinion, we're gonna come back and we wanna meet all together. And they decided 7-4 what they decided, but they didn't decide what you're saying they decided. Now, you've got that in direct conflict with a Virginia case, the Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board. And that case, the Fourth Judicial Circuit Court of Appeals said, we agree with the Middle District. The facts are identical. It was a young man who went through high school, wanted to use, and he was transgendering from female to male and wanted to use the men's room. And it went up, and Fourth Judicial Circuit said, or Fourth Court of Appeals said, we agree with the Middle District. You should have been allowed to the whole time. You're wrong. So now it's right to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. There is a conflict between at least two districts. Before there was no conflict. There has to be a conflict where the U.S. Supreme Court's going to take it. So my expectation is that if you create a policy right now, you don't know what you're creating. Because I don't expect that the language that comes out of the U.S. Supreme Court, no matter what it is going to be anything close to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals language. My recommendation is, we already have a policy that's basically a practice and procedure that's been implemented by the superintendent. I don't know what the problem is or what the rush is to go ahead and write a policy when if you wait 2 years, it's going to be probably decided by the U.S. Supreme Court and you'll have better language. It may well be that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling falls
Can I ask a
because it's wrong.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Let's say we don't have a policy,
Right.
and let's say something horrible happens to,
Like what?
well, let's say a young man who is
You're gonna get
transitioning. Well, we get sued lots, but let's say a young man is transitioning to be a girl, and that person accosts a young lady in a restroom.
Okay. Let me give you a response to that initial hypothetical. If it's a young man who's transitioning, he is not interested in women. He's interested in becoming
That's
one.
not
Well,
true.
that's the case.
So if you have somebody who's
The
faking
case
it,
is, though,
that's a whole different thing.
Mr. Bickner, there's a difference between somebody who is, gender is not the same thing as sexuality.
correct.
So a young man can be transitioning to be a female, but
If
may
he is
still be attracted to
transitioning, he is
females.
taking hormones that suppress his
But no.
male.
Now,
Transitioning
hormones-
has a specific
Okay,
definition.
then it's a young man who's wearing a skirt, who walks into a women's
Different thing,
restroom
yes, I get
and accosts a young lady. The bottom line is he sexually assaults a young lady.
Okay?
Getting sued.
So what happens
He's
then
just
to
violated
us?
our unwritten board policy. He's just violated what the procedure is that the superintendent is talking about.
So the lawyer for the defense basically comes back at us
Mm-hmm.
and says, okay, it's a procedure, but it wasn't in your policies.
That's right, we have lots of those.
And so what happens? Yes, we get sued, I get that.
That
But
doesn't
will we
come in
lose?
as, that doesn't come in as evidence. Because the simple fact that we do something, just because we don't have a policy doesn't mean we don't take care of what we're supposed to do. There are lots of things we don't have policies for because there are statutes that govern those.
So here's a question. What if instead of a policy, it was in the student code of conduct?
I want a policy.
Well,
Why?
Because there are parents, as a parent, I do not want that for my child. I want them to use,
Okay.
just like if you have medical
So
issues.
the point is for
just-
children to
just
know
in
the
case.
expectation, right?
Right.
Do you know that the
Like-
student code of conduct is what we go over on the first day of
Right.
school every year? They don't go over board policy. They go over the student code of
Mhm.
conduct. So if
You
you
could do
give
it
the
in both.
point of it,
That'd be great. You could do it in both.
So Mr. Bickner, if it's in the student code of conduct and it's approved by the school board, is it not in effect policy?
It's board policy.
so in the student code of conduct, if we were to add,
If you were to stipulate that, just the way I
just,
described it.
yes.
It would have the effect of policy.
And there are lots of things that we do in the student code of conduct that are not in the written board policy book. And
here's
I
the other thing.
refer to those every time a principal calls me and says, I don't know what to do with this situation. I just got somebody who brought me a court order from Alabama. I said, well, it doesn't mean anything until you domesticate it. Go look at page 52 in the Code of Conduct, and you'll see right under there that it says that. Now, that's board policy, but it's not in the big book, and it doesn't need to be in the big book. We can change the Code of Conduct fairly easily,
So here's
okay?
what
But I think
might
board
be-
policy has specific uses and specific reasons.
So I'm not opposed to a policy, Ms. Skipper. I'm not. I think there's a case to be made in timing. If the point is to enact it sooner than later, the student code of conduct, we could put it in immediately, where the advertising requirements exist for board policy. So what if we put it in the student code of conduct for now and then work towards a policy to follow the student code of conduct?
Which is policy.
I mean, it's redundant, but if
It's not- I
I'm,
mean,
if it's,
technically not, it's not a separate policy. But I just wanna let you know that the courts,
and you realize
when they
that-
ruled that the state is responsible for maintaining discipline, health, and safety, and that's why they did it in its favor. And realizing that schools were separate from public entities. Because schools fall under safety, security, and health.
You've taken 2 lines out of a
No, I didn't, I have the whole, I
150
have the
page,
whole thing.
a 150-page opinion.
I would like to know what that is that you're looking at. so I have
The
no
court
idea.
order, the whole, court hearing.
And where did
You can look
get
it up
that?
online. It's
I don't
public.
know the name of it, or.
You want the opinion?
I know Pennsylvania.
It's right here.
No, I-
All 150 pages of it.
I'll read it online. What, I mean, what is it?
It's
Like,
the St.
the
John's
name.
County.
Drew Adams
Yeah.
Oh,
versus,
that, okay.
versus School Board of
Yeah.
St. Johns County, Florida.
It's the actual court documentation.
Got it.
That's just why they went in that direction. And there are multiple articles where they actually interviewed Supreme Court justices and how, they would come up to all of this. And that's why I say that. That's why they haven't necessarily touched it. It has nothing to do because of the action. Some of them just haven't picked it up. But
So,
that
wait,
being
so
said,
you're saying that, okay, as
and the
I
Department
recall.
of Education supports all of this,
Right.
what happened. They released a statement on Wednesday.
When this, and I'm going to say the second court, it was the state Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken,
Which one?
correct? That ruled on this, and don't put it away, because I was just gonna ask you to read what you just said again, please.
State Supreme Court of where?
The state Supreme Court
Said
of
it doesn't
Florida.
matter because it's opinion. So even though that's why, I mean, they
But
have,
give me, what did they say, that the school district?
that the school's responsible for safety and security and
Right.
health of our students. And
Right.
that's why it's a separate entity.
That's purely an in loco argument. That's been made again and again and again. That's it, that's the definition of an in loco.
Right, okay. So then, having a policy
Partly why
would
they
have alleviated the hand slap that the St. Johns County got? Because as I recall, there's nothing, I mean, basically, they're,
How about we create a policy and she can just vote how she wants to? Or everybody just vote how they want to. Can we do that?
if a board member wants to present a policy, there's nothing preventing you from doing that, putting it on an agenda.
You want to just do that? And then that way you can do further
support, I mean, I'm
further
sitting here with nothing in front of me.
investigation.
I've not done any of the research. I was curious as to what the research was going to show. And as you said, there's not been any,
Pasco, Leon, St. Johns County, and a couple of other counties are actually adopting this policy. They've already had it, I think they started their advertisement.
I'll talk to folks
Couple
in those
days ago.
counties then.
Is
Got
it that they're all using the same policy?
Verbiage.
Okay, so if
The
you
exact
put
same
it,
verbiage, so can you provide that to us?
yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
gonna ask.
So we can see that, because I mean, I'm sorry, Ms. Skipper, but I'm sitting here with nothing.
It's
I'm
essentially
trying
the
to
same
bring-
thing
I'm
that
trying to
we
bring
do,
stuff
and
out.
it's planted in a policy.
But I'd like to see it in writing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got articles on it, but we can pull their policy whenever.
Okay.
Well, so if you bring it as an item to the board for consideration, then that needs to be the backup that we can look at.
Well, and the
Yes.
thing is I thought we were gonna collaborate and create one or whatever was
That's
my
what we're
understanding.
attempting to do, and that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So
just-
that's why I didn't necessarily, I mean, I have the
And-
verbiage, but I don't have the actual.
From personal, what,
Policy.
and just from a personal perspective,
Mm-hmm.
what Ms. Gilhausen said about the Code of Student Conduct is absolutely correct. Students are taught the Code of Student
They have
Conduct.
to sign it.
They have,
Like, there's
their parents
accountability
are
there for
involved
them.
with
We can do
this.
both.
But that is the policy that we work from. And the students are more, let me finish, please. The students are more aware of that, as is the public, than probably any of our policies. Because the policies are sitting here on a computer or in writing or whatever, and it's not something that people go back to and say, but this says. My concern is that if we're concerned that the students are not aware of what their responsibilities are, then we need to make them aware. And through this Code of Student Conduct, I would be very much in agreement with whatever the statement is that you had made as well.
The only other thing I throw out that this is not without any thought is that those districts, because I know in the case of Pasco, because I believe I talked to their superintendent, they had a policy previously that said the opposite. Therefore, the need to change it as a result of the 11th Court ruling would be there, whereas we never put in
But it's
policy.
a board policy, and that's the thing, we as a board, this is my opinion, you guys can do what you will with it, we have to start being proactive. Times, like I said, are changing, and not wait until something happens to be reactive. And I
don't think it's, so let's consider this in the same perspective that we consider, for example, the adoption of social studies curriculum. So there's legal battles that are going to be fought over hot topics. And as a board, if you enter into that battle on the front side, then you're the one paying the legal fees. That's tax dollars, right? Where if you let it shake out in the law and then implement your policy to follow what the law says.
or we can just change our policy in 3 years if it does change, because it's gonna take about 3-4 years to.
The problem is
for
the
any
suit
of
will
that.
come before you change the law, the
Maybe.
policy. Like St. Johns County, I'm sure, has paid a lot of money in legal fees to go through the court system with their policy, right? Say what?
They won't.
Yeah, which is great, but you still pay.
Well, depending, sometimes you can negotiate that.
So I just think the point is that we want boys who were born male to use the boy bathroom, girls who were born female to use the female bathroom. That's our practice. We put that in the student code of conduct. It's not an issue legally. But the emphasis is made, the signatures from the students that they agree to our student code of conduct, that where they don't sign our board policies, but they do sign our code of conduct. Their parents sign our code of conduct that they're gonna abide by that. So while I get what you're saying about a policy that feels like it has more teeth, to actually make the change, which is not a change, it's just enforcing what we already do, to make that have more teeth, it would be in the code of conduct.
I agree with that.
And that's what think about students who get in trouble at school. How are their consequences determined? Through the code of conduct.
Yeah, I want both, but if you guys don't, that's fine,
I'm not saying I don't want both. I'm saying let's be strategic about how we do it.
Right. We want it to be in writing. Basically, you want it to be in writing in front of the kids, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I want
That's where-
that's where public to see, like, they can go on to our board policies
Okay,
and they can see.
we're talking about the
So
kids.
if I'm moving from, well, for parents too, this is security.
Which is the
It's-
kids.
Yes,
This is the
correct.
kids.
This is what I'm saying, you're protecting the kids and then the parents
No,
are
I'm saying
understanding.
we're educating the kids
Right.
to this policy.
Right, but let's just say I wanna move from another county, because, I don't know, I'm tired of
Sure.
everything going on in the country. And I'm going to go and I'm gonna look, Clay County is a top 10 district, let's look it up, let's see what their policies are though, cause it could be great school. But I'm gonna tell you this, from a parent, it could be an awesome, outstanding school, or school district, or you can have all the bells and whistles. But if you don't have parental involvement from my angle, or you don't have good policies that protects my child, you can forget it. I'm not moving, or I'm not attending, or I'm not putting my child there, or I'm not doing this or that. I want to know that my child is safe. So from a parental perspective, that's also what I'm looking at.
And you're not going to move until you see, well, the code of student conduct is also on the computer. I mean, if you go to the schools and start going through anything that's required of the students, you will hit on the code of student conduct, and you will find that. But I understand what you're saying about the policy.
Why is it that we don't want to make one?
I didn't say I don't want to make one. I said I want to be strategic about how we make it.
Slow it down.
Bingo.
if you do what I heard.
Well, I mean, we don't have to do it tomorrow, that's why I didn't bring the actual verbiage, but talking about it, going behind the scenes for next workshop to have an actual policy in front of you, so that by, the end of the summer, it's an actual policy, or before the end of the summer, it's an actual policy.
So
Because it takes 30
timeline,
days to advertise, right? And then we vote?
No, it takes
28?
28.
Okay. And then vote.
and as far as the courts, what is the next step with St. Johns County? That's what I'm not understanding.
I guess the one thing that I bring forward, and I'm good either way, the board, of course, makes policy, it's not a superintendent role to do so, but I can't help but bring this forward, is that if we had a written policy back when this case was first decided, we then would have to come forward with an opposite policy and put our name to it, in essence endorse it, because the courts came up with a ruling that we didn't
right.
personally believe in or like. Instead, we did not do that as a district. Instead, we continued the practice, that's currently practice, that I believe we all agreed to as the best practice for this particular situation. We would have wound up strategically on the wrong end of that stick
That's right.
in how we protected children, as you put it. That's what would have happened.
But
Now, I think
things
the other
evolve and
districts,
we change policy.
the other districts are in that boat, which is why now they're reversing themselves. Because they reacted to the original court ruling, came up with a policy that said the court ruling, even though they didn't like it probably. Now they're going back because they have to change their policy. We have never had a policy, but we've always had a practice in place. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as I'm superintendent, boys are gonna use the boys' room, girls are gonna use the girls' room. And if there's other challenges related to a student, we're gonna accommodate that student and do what's right for that student.
And that was, I
That's
think,
always
only
been the
one county
practice
that
of our district.
actually had to flip. The others are actually just initiating it, from what I'm understanding.
Well, I'm not opposed to a policy. I just want to make sure that we're not going to pay exorbitant court fees on a policy when we could accomplish the same thing by putting it in the code of conduct and avoid court costs. But, I mean, I'm amenable if you want to bring it to the board at any point, whenever you want to add it to an agenda, just if you'll let me or Mr. Broski know, we'll put it on. And we usually take up the student code of conduct, what month is that?
What month is that? Code of conduct.
So we're hoping, the timeline is to go ahead and start now with it.
Okay.
And hope that we can bring it in like March or April.
Okay.
Also, the student code of conduct and the student progression plan actually are advertised just like policy.
Okay.
So
So
the
we would
public will
need
be
that, we
aware.
would be able to put that in March into the code of conduct, and then if you want to talk about a policy, we can do that too. So we have 2 board members that are not here to weigh in on this, and I would really like to hear from both of them as well. But like I said, I'm not at all opposed to having a policy. I think we just need to be strategic about it.
Okay, any other direction?
Are there any other questions? No? Okay.
That's
That's it
that's
for
the
you.
end.
All right. We didn't have any participation from the audience today. Mr. Superintendent, did you have anything left to add?
No, it's literacy week. Can't emphasize the importance of reading in a young person's life. And reading, I would just kind of say this, it's not a natural process. It has to actually be taught. You give a child a book and the child sits there, the child can sit there as long as he wants. Without a human interacting with them, they'll never learn to read. So I encourage everybody to involve themselves in literacy at that young child, particularly pre-K through 3rd grade. You know how important that time frame is in reading to a child and teaching those skills both at home
and at school. Madam Chair.
Okay. School board attorney comments, Mr. Bittner.
Thank you.
Okay. School board member, Ms. Bola?
On that point, excellent literacy night, Friday night, what a hoot. I mean,
Was that at the Orange Park Library?
no, that's coming up. That's
Oh,
a
that was the
Title
one
I
at the TTC.
meeting that's coming up at the Orange Park Library. This was literacy night for early literacy night. That was set up at here, at we're not at Fleming Island, are we? At Fleming Island at the TTC. And as I'm walking in and principals and teachers are bringing in their kids, their younger students, and it was dynamic. I mean, they had a little reading area going, they had crafts going, they had people throughout that, the public library was there. That was dynamic. It was a great opportunity. And the whole group was like, okay, and we want to try doing this in Oakleaf, and we want to try going to Orange Park, and we want to bring as many people to literacy as possible at an early age, which, of course, I always have to say, is started with the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, 32043 and 32073. Other than that, reading tomorrow, Wilkinson. There were a couple of other things, the band competition. There's stuff that's going to continue going on. Thursday night, Teacher of the Year, School-Related Employee of the Year. It's going to be exciting. Perhaps if Ms. Hanson can't be there, we can step in for her.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we'll see what's going on with that, but it should be a great night.
Chorus on Friday.
That's right, all county chorus, and then all county chorus on Monday as well. The upper chorus will be at the Baptist Church, and then the elementary chorus is at Thrasher Horn again. So we'll be doing a double night at the Thrasher Horn. So, and for future calendars, that all county elementary course is always the 3rd or 4th Friday in January. I was reminded of that. Yes, I know, I've been here many times, but I don't think there's anything else off the top of my head, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bola. Ms. Skipper? Nothing? All right. Well, I am looking forward to Wilkinson tomorrow as well. I got in touch with the teacher. I've been assigned to Miss Treywick's classroom. So I contacted her to see what they were currently studying, and they're doing poetry right now in language arts. So I'm bringing my Robert Louis Stevenson children's poetry book. And
I don't know how great I am yet tomorrow.
So
Did you call them and ask them?
Well, no, they reached out to me.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. But last year, when I was teaching in 3rd grade, we had a standing appointment. I would choose 3 scholars for my class, and we'd do poetry and tea together in the teacher's lounge. I'd pull them in during their lunchtime, and it was such a highlight of the week. And now teaching PE, I don't get poetry and tea. So I'm excited for it tomorrow.
Maybe you're jumping rope, you can do those.
And it's hard to sip tea while you jump rope. But we might be able to recite poetry, I don't know. And then obviously Teacher of the Year is such a beautiful event and exciting for everybody. And then Friday, I will miss the elementary chorus. I'm going to hear Dr. Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College. He's giving a speech and doing a meet and greet. He's one of my personal education heroes, so I'm excited to meet him and learn from him. If there's no further business, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Where do you want to meet?
She thought everybody was gonna show up. No, this is my, I want to do the request. Where do you want to?
Okay.
I'm fine.